Please give a warm, Our Bold Voices welcome to Judge Kemp.
During the Stonewall riots in New York, I was 4 years old. My father, Judge Kemp Sr., was a master sergeant in the U.S. Army stationed at Fort Bragg Military Installation in Fayetteville, North Carolina. My mother was a caretaker of the home and provided the maternal support for my older sister and me. The North Carolina summers can be pretty brutal. And the highlight for me were always our trips to the bay swimming pools. And it wasn't the cool and refreshing waters that presented the reward most that I enjoyed. It was the thrill of the locker room. Every size and every shape of the naked male frame was paraded before my very young eyes. I've always known that I was a little different. Even when I was in the first grade, I remember having a special friend, Tommy, and he and I were inseparable. It wasn't uncommon to see us chasing each other around during recess, but our favorite time was movie time. In the darkness, we felt safe and free from judgment, and we would often hold hands and let our fingers explore each other. Tommy. So fast forward. My parents divorced, and my two sisters were all moved to Southern California. In San Diego, this North County area called Penasquitos, very conservative. Well, growing up as a teenager there, it wasn't uncommon for me to be called the N-word as I would be walking to the 7-Eleven. And so I decided, because I was still feeling that queer nuance, I decided to hide my truth. I had a girlfriend. And though it felt forced, it felt artificial, I did it anyway. I wanted to conform to the societal norms. Nothing really extreme happened other than, a little groping and some kissing. And only after a couple of short months, I decided to end it. Fast forward, it's the 80s now. My mother had several gay and lesbian friends that she would always go dancing with. One of her friends was younger. His name was Mark Bathke. I can still remember that to this day. He had sandy blonde hair, pale blue eyes, and a nice hairy chest. And he had this smile that was framed by one of those Tom Selleck mustaches. He just made me swoon. Every time he would look at me, I would just melt. And I had a big crush on him. So did my older sister. So at the age of 16, I decided it was time for me to come out. And so one evening, as my mother was finishing up the dinner dishes, I quietly approached her and I said, "I think I might be gay." Saying those words, in my mind, it felt like time stopped. And I could hear my heart just pounding in my chest. And without taking a break from the dishes, my mother asked, "Why do you think you're gay?" And my response was, "Because I really like guys," I said. Well, that answer wasn't good enough. And she had me write her a letter. And I think I titled the letter, "Why I Think I'm Gay." I think it was more like an essay, but yeah, I can remember writing something like, well, in this letter, I really like guys, I said. And I've always liked guys, even when I was a little kid. And even when I was dating girls, I would still be thinking about guys. I did also mention I had a big crush on her friend Mark, too. She was quiet. processing this new information. You see, my family, I'm the only male child in an all-female household. And so my mother thought that perhaps the lack of a positive masculine influence or even the influence of her gay friends may have contributed to my admission. So she had me speak to one of her church friends, Wayne. Wayne was about 15 years older than I, and, he was also gay. With Wayne, he allowed me to speak about my new awareness and also sometimes the physical confirmations my dreams would produce, some things I couldn't tell my mother. With Wayne, I was in a safe space. I was able to ask him about his coming out, the challenges, and even how to meet guys. Honestly, I was too nervous to ask about sex. So, it's 1984 now, and there was conversations going around about this mysterious disease that was wiping out gay men called AIDS. There was more conversation going around talking about AIDS than it was Stonewall for this now newly emancipated homo. I'm in my 20s, studying dance, and I got cast in my first show. And so during the audition for this show, I asked one of the cast members if anyone else here was enchanted. Those were my words. So this cast member, his name is John, we're actually still good friends to this day. John stood about 6'4", had a big barrel waist and a beautiful baritone voice. And John said, "By enchanted, if you mean gay, then yes." Here's where I found my teachers. Here's where I found my tribe. Here is where I found my lovers. At this show, the show I was doing, this is where I learned compassion and resistance. Here is where I learned compassion, resistance, love, support, and acknowledgement of the community. Much like what happened in Stonewall some 50 years ago. Thank you.